Dan Borrero is joining us today on this episode of Truth or Comfort, and I appreciate you joining us. You've kind of taken midday out yourself to come on early here. You're East Coast. You're in New York, New York City.
Right.
We're over here in Phoenix. It's getting a little warm this time of year, but I appreciate you taking the time and spending with us today and sharing with everybody your story. So I would love to talk about how you got involved with real estate, your passion, and kind of your trials, tribulations, kind of some of the, I would say issues or things that you've had to work through along the way and how it's provided for you and your family and, how that's working out are your kids. You mentioned you have daughters, right? So
Yep.
are
Yep.
they in the real estate game? I'd love to hear all about this, and I'm sure the audience would as well. Not to mention, I know you have a unique way of how you negotiate and find deals, and yeah, would love to talk about that. And you do some coaching as well. So let's
I
talk
do.
about all of it.
Yeah. I don't. Where would you like to start? How about that?
So how long have you been doing real estate for?
So I've been doing this since 1989. And it's funny, John. I tell everybody the same thing. Unless you're born with a silver spoon in your mouth, you need to leverage your job. So essentially, I've always been self-employed. I always knew I was going to be self-employed. So my first business was in 1985. I opened up a video store, believe it or not, and I was in that one location for 25 years. And that video store morphed into beepers. At one time we had 130,000 beeper subscribers that we were managing on a monthly basis, and we didn't have the computer systems that we have now, right? So that was a whole lot of paperwork. And then that grew into the cell phone business, and then eventually we got out of that business. But the entire time, what we were doing was leveraging our 9 to 5 job, which was that video store that we originally started with, and I would buy properties as I came aware of them, right? Um, and one of the criterias was I wouldn't buy anything that I couldn't walk to from my office.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, because if anybody's familiar with the traffic in New York City, it's insanity, right? So it could take me an hour just to go 8 miles, 9 miles. So if it took me an hour going and an hour coming, I just lost 2 hours in my car that was not productive. Eventually, we started then buying in New Jersey, and then we started buying in Florida. Right now, we are very heavy in Central Florida. We've got a lot of doors in Central Florida as well. But our the entire concept in a short, as short as I could put it, is we do our fix and flips. We take our income from our fix and flips, and that's what we do and then we use that income to buy our long-term holds. Because the
Hmm.
reality is, guys, in this business, the real money's on the long-term hold, um, on the asset appreciation and on the cash flow. So that's the goal.
Yeah, that's very similar to my model. Like I'll do the fix and flips to put for down payments on,
Yes.
a commercial asset. Really
Right.
is typically how we do it. Yeah, very
Yeah.
very similar. So that is that is in my opinion the only way. Otherwise, you're just have a job fixing and flipping,
Yeah.
and
You just
at some
you
point,
create you just what you did was buy yourself a job.
yeah,
Um, Yeah. So the
yeah.
real money, I've always said it, is in the long term hold. So and it's given me a really good life. I'm not going to kid you. I've got 4 kids. 3 have graduated without any student debt. Right. They've all traveled Europe. I made sure that they traveled a minimum of one semester across Europe. Um, and my last one's up in Boston, Northeastern, and he's graduating in 2 years, and he'll also graduate with no debt. So it's provided us a really good life, a really good life.
That's great. I love to hear that. So you talked early on about like without the silver spoon. Like let's talk about like you know ha- what drove you to get into real estate.
So I come from first generation. I'm first generation born here in the States. So
Okay.
having said that, my parents always pushed education. My uncles, my aunts always pushed education. And I come from a very large family. And it's funny because the first generation born here, we've all done extremely well as a result of not only what our parents told us, but the way they showed us how to live, right? Um,
Hmm.
they were constantly working. There was never an excuse. Things happen, so what? Move on, you know. Um, so as I was growing up, I realized in the neighborhood I was in, all the shopkeepers, the store owners, they would all buy the buildings eventually that they had their local stores on in, right? And then they eventually would buy the building across the street or one down the corner. And when by the time I was a teenager growing up in the same neighborhood, I said, wait a minute, these guys are doing pretty damn good, especially when they're selling.
Yeah.
And so by the time I graduated from college, I came right back to the old neighborhood, and that's exactly what I did, literally.
Yeah. So you
Um,
saw like, okay, this is essentially you saw what people were doing, and like I'm going to duplicate that process. This
in the
is
beginning
they have
part,
something I
yes.
want. I'm going to do what they've done, get what they've got.
Yeah, and listen, my father had a grocery store, bodega, in Brooklyn, and I grew up in that store, and he was friendly with the other storekeepers, and you hear them talking all the time, and I guess I was exposed to it without
Hmm.
realizing I was exposed to it, although we weren't in that side of the business, right? So when I got graduated from college, I remember I came to my dad and I says, I got a 4-year plan, and we're all going to be rich, and that's exactly when I started my 4-year plan. At
Okay.
the end of the 4 years is when I bought my first property for $72,000. I still own that property. It's a two-family pre-war brick construction, and it's
Very
probably
cool that you
worth
still have
about,
it.
yeah, it's about probably worth about 2.6 million right now
Wow.
because of its location. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, that's some growth right there.
Oh my God, yeah, yeah. I mean, did I plant? I didn't plan that side of it. I mean, I thought it would grow in asset value, but I did. I think it was going to grow to that amount. No, that happened to be a lot of luck and staying the course, if that helps you.
Yeah, and not to mention some sacrifice along the way. Like
Oh,
you've
absolutely.
sacrificed, you could have sold that many times over and over, and no one would fault you for it, right?
Right,
The fact
right.
that like it still produces for you to this day, I bet you it probably outproduces in an annual basis what you bought it for
I'll tell you
originally.
exactly. It's averaging almost $7,500 a month
Yeah,
net. Because
right,
remember, we're in New York, right? The rents are much everything's relative, right? The scales are
right.
different, right? So yes, it's. I mean, where can you possibly have put $72,000? And I gotta put something. We probably spent another 30,000 renovating it back then, and we were doing it ourselves at night, after work,
Right,
because we couldn't afford to do it any other way. But let's say we're into it for 100, 110. You know,
right.
it's $7,500 return. 31 years later, and the asset appreciation's over 2 million.
Yeah. Well, I think that's phenomenal, and I think that's exactly why people should be investing in real estate for the long term, not only for the cash flow and the monthly, but also the appreciation, but more importantly, the inflation, right?
Oh
So
yes.
so you get a hedge against inflation in investing in real estate, which, you know, you could do those fix and flips or not do any of it. You still have to, be investing in something that's going to help with inflation. I think we'll see some more inflation
Yeah.
here coming through with how much money's sitting out there, which, holding assets like you have are just going to continue to rise
So I
in
just
that.
got a question asked to me, was it 2 days ago, asking me why am I still holding on to my properties in New York when I'm so diversified, where I could also move that money to Jersey or Florida, where Florida's going through an incredible growth, right? And my argument was, where am I possibly going to get the same return with the numbers I purchased this at on properties that's already paid off, or it's given me tons and tons of cash flow, providing a really good life.
Right.
And I never count New York City out. For whatever reason, it's always bounced back. We did lose a lot of value as a result of COVID. People were like leaving the city in droves,
Right.
but they're starting to come back gradually again. Yeah.
Yeah, New Yorkers, I think, are pretty resilient, so I'm not worried about you guys at all. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So you got going, you bought your first property. I mean, it's quite a, big jump between buying your first property and now, doing the land acquisitions that you're doing. You're helping other people help, help see and accomplish their dreams and using real estate as that vehicle.
Right.
And then there's, so that's a big jump. And I'm sure there's some skin knees. You fell down along the way. We all have those, those injuries that, we all have these stories, right? And it could typically be like we all have stories on a property, right? It's not like it's ever, very seldomly does it go perfect, but you learn to roll with it, right? And you learn to adjust and, the big word
John,
now
what
is
you just described was the second property I ever bought, which was